It has been 3 months since the total destruction of Raccoon City, and Claire Redfield is still searching for her missing brother, Chris. Claire's search takes her to an umbrella-owned facility in Paris, where she is discovered and met with fierce resistance. Claire attempts an impressive escape from the clutches of the hired soldiers, but it proves to be just not enough. She is captured by Rodrigo Juan Raval, an Umbrella military commander, and is shipped to the remote Rockfort Island facility. Claire finds herself interrogated and then imprisoned. She is knocked unconscious by a guard, and hours later she awakens to the sound of explosions. Facing imminent death, Claire receives an opportunity once more when an inexplicable air raid on the island wipes out most of the island inhabitants and damages the majority of its structures. Unfortunately, the air raid also causes the accidental release of T-virus samples and BOW, which spread quickly and wipe out the remaining survivors. Claire is thrust back into the world of survival horror once again, with the odds seemingly stacked against her. Claire finds support in fellow inmate Steve Burnside but encounters untold hardships when the insane island commander, Alfred Ashford, and his equally evil twin sister, Alexia Ashford, set their sights on causing the end of the duo in their own sick, twisted, and demented games. Claire and Steve manage to escape the island, only to have been forcibly directed to Antarctica. When attempting to escape the Antarctic Umbrella base, Steve manages to mortally harm Alfred while Claire successfully dispatches a mutated Alexander Ashford. As Claire and Steve attempt to leave for an Australian research outpost in a snowmobile, Claire and Steve get attacked by tentacles deployed by a revived Alexia. Meanwhile, Chris Redfield has been in hiding with the surviving stars, members following their harrowing survival story at the Spencer Mansion in Raccoon City. When word from Leon S. Kennedy reaches him that his sister Claire has been captured by Umbrella, he races against time to reach Rockfort and rescue her from danger. However, what Chris discovers on the island is something he never expected. A man from his past who should, by all rights, be dead, his former captain, Albert Wesker. Wesker has his own agenda that he is relentlessly executing. He is working for a new enemy, pursuing an unknown interest. As Chris soon finds out, this is not the Wesker he remembers, as Wesker possessed superhuman speed and strength. Chris learns from Wesker that Claire was already in Antarctica and attempts to rescue her. Chris gets reunited with Claire, with the pair attempting to rescue Steve, only to get separated again. Claire manages to reach Steve, only for him to die a heroic death after saving her from a tentacle. Chris, on the other hand, gets into a skirmish with Alexia and arms the self-destruct system to regroup with Claire. Chris successfully kills Alexia with a prototype weapon and successfully evacuates the base with Claire. Rockfort Island was an island in the South Pacific Ocean. The island was taken over by the Umbrella Corporation in the 1990s to accommodate its growing paramilitary, and included a concentration camp for enemies and traitors to the company. The island was left uninhabited in December 1998 following an attack by HCF, which resulted in the release of the T-virus on the island population. Rockfort Island was settled by an Hispanic community for several generations. At some point, the island became the property of the aristocratic Ashford family, who served as its governors and owned a mansion on the island. When Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, was appointed by Umbrella HQ to oversee the running of Umbrella facilities on the island in 1993, the locals were driven off the island or otherwise employed. A training camp for Umbrella's paramilitary was constructed on the island and opened the following year to accommodate the Umbrella Security Service. T-virus BOW were also produced within this camp as a source of practical combat training. Along with the military base, Ashford also oversaw the construction of a concentration camp for the internment of spies and company traitors. Conditions in this camp were extreme, and over the next 4 years many prisoners were executed by guillotine or used as experiments, with some victims of this extreme brutality being loyal Umbrella employees who asked too many questions. Growing mad with power, Ashford neglected to repair the decaying infrastructure constructed by the Hispanic settlers, and instead used prison laborers to construct a bridge crossing the valley between his two mansions, executing them upon completion out of disgust of the idea they may see his sister, Alexia, whom he imagined to live there. In December 1998, HCF infiltrated the island to gain information on the T. veronica virus, a progenitor strain that was developed by Dr. Alexia Ashford in the 1980s. Former Umbrella USA researcher Dr. Albert Wesker had been aware of Dr. Ashford's research and led the operation to retrieve a sample. Amid the chaos, the T-virus was released from an underground laboratory at the training camp. During the actual attack, the island infrastructure suffered serious damage, and Umbrella's forces took heavy casualties from HCF's bombings and from escaped BOW. A number of people were infected and, due to its mutagenic effects, mistaken for dead and prematurely buried in the prison cemetery. These prisoners were able to dig themselves out during a storm. With Umbrella beaten, the few survivors made their way to the island's airport, where C-130 transport planes were waiting. These planes were flown, with computer assistance, to the Antarctic base, which was also under the control of Ashford, and the site of a subsequent outbreak as infected individuals spread the T-virus there. Among the remaining, uninfected survivors were Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside, two escaped prisoners, Rodrigo Juan Raval, an Umbrella Security Service member, an unnamed Umbrella researcher, and Ashford himself. Angry over the loss of the island and adamant that a spy was behind the attack, Ashford incorrectly assumed Redfield to be that agent, and made several attempts to shoot her, or otherwise send BOW after her, including a T-078 Tyrant. Ready to abandon the island, Ashford triggered a series of bombs under the island facilities to contain the outbreak, though Redfield and Burnside were able to escape in time in another C-130. The following day, Chris Redfield made his way to the island. After receiving a tip-off from U.S. agent Leon S. Kennedy as to the location of his sister, there he found the island in ruins and almost entirely populated by mutants. With the death of Raval, the only remaining uninfected people were HCF, who had failed their search for T. Veronica and were preparing to disembark to Antarctica. Redfield himself escaped via a Harrier jet, leaving the island abandoned, though small. Rockford Island's terrain was shaped by valleys and mountains, requiring the construction of bridges. Nothing is known of the island's civilian infrastructure. A concentration camp was located on the island and was quite extensive in its size. On the other side of a valley was the military training facility, in which anti-BOW warfare was one such topic. Ashford himself owned two mansions on the island, one located near the military training facility and another on the other end of a second valley. An airport was also located on the island, which allowed for the shipment of supplies, personnel, and BOW cargo. This airport has not been seen, though it is known to have been large enough to support several C-130 Hercules. A second airport, or section of this airport, was hidden within a tunnel leading out to the coast and in which a seaplane was stored. The official residence was a palace which served as the official place of residence for the governors of Rockford Island. How long the building was on Rockford is uncertain, as the island was for decades territory controlled by the Ashford dynasty. The 7th Earl, Alfred Ashford, lived there only briefly in 1993 before moving to the newly constructed private residence the following year. The building was modified that year to accommodate a bridge linking the two buildings over a valley. Access to the palace appears to have been at one time via an ornate marble bridge, but this was destroyed at the time of the outbreak, and instead, one must use the narrow stairway leading from the training facility. Also accessible from the palace is a submarine used as an elevator to access the subterranean airport. Hidden at the rear of the palace and accessed from Alfred's office is a narrow covered bridge that leads to Alfred's private residence. The palace was left inaccessible to Chris Redfield following the island's self-destruct detonation, and was likely either destroyed or heavily damaged. The palace had been furnished to reflect island commander Alfred Ashford's militaristic tastes, and included a main hall complete with imposing portrait of Alfred in full military regalia, a display room for his model and gun collection, a gaming room, and a gallery of Alfred's family portraits. More functional rooms include a large meeting room, bathroom, Alfred's own office, and a waiting room for visitors. The private residence was one of two large mansions on Rockford Island owned by the Ashford family. It served as an alternative to the official residence, which was effectively used as an administration. The private residence was built under Alfred Ashford's orders in 1994. Alfred developed a split personality based on his missing sister, Alexia, and banned anyone from visiting the residence in order to protect her. This included even his own secretary, Robert Dawson, who he later had interred at the nearby prison complex. The mansion, neglected, began to fall apart in the late 1990s. With an underground passage to the mansion destroyed by a cave-in, Alfred had the local prisoners construct a bridge linking the private and official residences, crossing a valley. To keep the building a perpetual secret to the island residents, the prisoners were executed following the bridge's completion. In December 1998, HCF, a paramilitary run by a rival company to Umbrella, attacked the island, believing that Alexia has returned and seeking her veronica virus, not knowing that it was Alfred cross-dressing as her because of mental illness he developed as a result of being alone for 15 years. Unlike the palace, which is decorated in accordance with Alfred's military tastes, his private house has been furnished heavily to appease his Alexia persona, with many custom-made porcelain dolls and childish toys on display, including one particularly large, horrifically mutilated doll suspended in the main hall. In the Darkside Chronicles, the doll had several legs on the scalp and one of the eye sockets made to look grotesque. The ground-floor dining room appears to have not been used in some time, while the third-floor bedrooms of Alfred and Alexia are linked by a hidden door, with both featuring hidden ladders to a fourth floor with a working carousel, which itself hides access to a fifth-floor study. The residence is a towering Gothic house built on a hill overlooking the official residence. The bedrooms of both Alfred and Alexia are modeled after their rooms from the Antarctic base. The house had fallen into some disrepair by the time of the Rockford attack, likely due to Alfred's insistence that no one can save himself and his sister be allowed entrance, and as such many areas such as the entire second floor past the main hall appear. Rockford Island hosted a large concentration camp under the control of the Umbrella Corporation. It was destroyed in the 1998 Rockford Island incident, which saw an HCF strike on the island and a T-virus outbreak. The camp commander was Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford. There are multiple sections of the prison, but the area south of the Iron Bridge is known as the Prison Area D. The prison was opened in the 1990s, soon after Lord Ashford moved to Rockford Island. The prison housed industrial saboteurs and traitors to the company along with their families. Claire Redfield was held after her unsuccessful raid on Umbrella Europe's Paris lab complex, while Steve Burnside was held alongside his father, who sold Umbrella data on the black market without authorization. Another prisoner, Robert Dawson, was Lord Ashford's private attendant, until Alfred grew displeased with him and he was interred in the prison. Dawson was later tortured to death by the prison's insane medical officer. A number of prisoners, those who weren't killed by the doctor, were instead buried alive in the prison cemetery. When HCF attacked the island, the prison camp suffered heavy damage, with large sections of the complex being rendered inaccessible. The prison complex assumed a general concentration camp design, with a number of huts being built within the walled enclosure, preventing escape attempts. The walls were largely unnecessary, however, given the presence of a deep ravine flowing against it. Prison camps were noticeably unhygienic, with a number of people sharing a small section of the building for sleeping. A medical hut with crematorium was located nearby, which was built over a dungeon and torture chamber to fulfill the sadistic desires of the prison camp doctor. The Rockford Island Military Training Center was an elite training camp located on Rockford Island, and was the primary training camp for Umbrella's paramilitary forces, the Umbrella Security Service and Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. The facility was destroyed during the 1998 Rockford Island incident. By the 1990s, the Umbrella Corporation had swelled to the extent a larger paramilitary was necessary, having already established the USS as an elite security force and the UBCS as a biohazard containment force. Rockford Island was picked as the spot for training to take place, being a far-off private island owned by Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, a newly hired executive with familial ties to the corporation. In the process of converting the island to Umbrella's needs, the resident Spanish settler population was evicted from the island and their village destroyed to make room for new facilities. The training center itself was built around a church, with BOW, testing and viral research labs stored underground in caverns the settlers once used as a cemetery. Completion of the facility took place on December 8, 1993. The facility was built around an abandoned church used by the Spanish settlers on the island, of whom Rodrigo Juan Raval is a descendant. This church would be used for storage, as well as to house an elevator to the underground catacombs where the settlers' tombs were kept. The facility features, among other things, a full-sized working tank displayed in an outside courtyard, part of Alfred's private collection, a repair garage, underground BOW, and virus storage facilities, direct access to the subterranean airport, an industrial cargo elevator and turntable, a large bathhouse with sauna, administration offices, and a sophisticated control room. Because of heavy damage suffered during Wesker's attack, areas of the facility are inaccessible by the time Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside arrive to explore it. Later damage caused by the island's self-destruct sequence leaves the facility heavily damaged but still standing in places. This allows Chris Redfield to move around much of the facility, although the west side is all but completely inaccessible by this time. The facility was later abandoned along with the rest of the island. The Antarctic base was an expansive complex built by the Umbrella Corporation in Antarctica, south of the 82nd parallel. The base pulled double duty as a state-of-the-art research outpost and a transport terminal for illicit cargo shipments. The facility functioned autonomously from other corporate divisions, being the only facility within Umbrella South Pole. The Antarctic base was built in 1969 on the orders of the Umbrella Pharmaceuticals geneticist, Dr. Alexander Ashford, 6th Earl Ashford. Utilizing the remnants of an abandoned mine included within the plans was a warehouse, an airport, a laboratory, and a large house for his habitation. Having not studied virology, Lord Ashford instead used the lab for genetic research, specifically in the Code Veronica project, a eugenics experiment which sought to successfully clone a human being with advantageous genetic alterations. No further genetic research is known after the experiment was a success in 1971. In 1981, his creation Alexia was offered a research job by Umbrella after graduating from university at a young age, and began work on the T-virus project in Antarctica, which soon gave way to the T-Veronica project. In 1983, both Alexander and Alexia were mutated as a result of Alexia's fledgling T-Veronica strain. Both survived, though Alexander was kept in confinement and Alexia was placed in a comatose state, projecting another 15 years before the virus would properly bond with her. With both researchers believed dead by the company, the laboratory was abandoned, with all work in the complex transferred to the transport terminal. In the 1990s, Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, was given control over the terminal when he formally joined Umbrella. Under his neglectful and disinterested leadership, the terminal became seriously undermanned, with workers kept at the base for as long as 8 years without vacation time. The workers consequently saw the facility as no different from a hard labor camp. These problems had a global impact. In one instance, the resultant backlogs caused a temporary shortage of APL-14, and American laboratories had to donate their own supplies to the intended recipient of the large shipment in December 1998. HCF, a special forces unit led by the believed dead Albert Wesker, attacked Rockford Island in their search for the T-Veronica virus, quickly defeating the island's defense force by releasing the island's viral and bioorganic weapons. A number of infected survivors fled from the island on C-130 Hercules cargo planes, spreading the virus to the aircraft's autonavigational system's preset destination, the Antarctic base. Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside, 2 of the survivors of the outbreak, managed to requisition a mining vehicle from the abandoned mine and attempted to utilize it as a means of escape. At this point, Alfred, who had pursued them from Rockford, unsuccessfully attempted to ambush them, but was instead shot by Steve and fell into a disused mine shaft to his presumed demise. Continuing on, Claire and Steve reached the heliport, where they were attacked by the newly released Alexander. Claire, however, soon defeated him. Meanwhile, a fatally injured Alfred made his way to the cryogenics laboratory to bring Alexia back to life as initially planned 15 years prior. She would avenge her brother by destroying the snowmobile in which his presumed killers were attempting to escape. Claire's brother Chris would later take a Harrier from Rockford Island to the facility in his search for Claire, finding her cocooned to a wall in the residence connecting to the terminal. After Chris released her, Claire discovered Steve in the base's prison, but it was too late. Alexia had already infected him with T-Veronica, and, not long after Claire discovered him, killed him when he successfully resisted the virus-induced madness to save Claire's life. Despite surviving, Claire was trapped. Chris activated the facility's self-destruct system to destroy the base and rescue Claire by releasing all locks in the base, killing Alexia and fighting to a stalemate with Wesker before escaping with Claire as the Antarctic base detonated behind them. Zombies are humans afflicted with the cannibal disease, an illness caused by the T-virus, a bioweapon originally developed by Dr. James Marcus, one of the founding members of the Umbrella Corporation. Despite having minimal organ function and a deceased-like appearance, these creatures are not reanimated corpses but living humans who have been infected and transformed by the virus mutations. Zombie dog is a term referring to domesticated canines infected with the T-virus through its secondary method, namely the ingestion of infected food or organisms. It should be noted that they are separate from the Cerberuses. The latter was created specifically as a bioorganic weapon, while zombie dogs are viewed and treated as unintended side effects of T-virus dispersal and are thus classified as irregular mutants. Like their BOW relatives, the zombie dogs retain much of their former agility, with a noticeable increase in durability and aggression. In most cases, potential prey should listen for the sound of padding paws as a clue to their presence, with a growling warning that it has become aware of the prey and is preparing to attack. They will let out a pained yelp when killed. Akin to the canine-related T-virus mutation is a general necrosis in their left eye orbit, leaving their left eye visible bulge out of their otherwise savage but proportional facade, making for an even more fearsome appearance. Curiously, these zombie dogs sometimes become active only when in close proximity to prey, completely ignoring the sound of gunfire nearby. This is particularly noticeable in the power room of the Antarctic base. Whether this is down to the dogs being heavy sleepers or simply a deliberate act of lying in wait for prey to come to them is unknown. These dogs also learned to grab hold of a human arm and would attempt to shake it loose. The albinoid is the result of the T-virus having been injected into salamanders. The effect is as usual with simpler animals injected with T-virus. Considerable growth with some mutation, immature albinoids can generate a moderately powerful electric shock to stun prey in close proximity. These infants are encountered by Claire Redfield in the BOW lab of the Military Training Center where they broke into the laboratory she was in. Although relatively weak in this state, they will grow to adulthood in a matter of 10 hours or more. Chris Redfield encounters this creature fully grown in a pool of water in the basement of the training facility. They are most deadly in the water due to their ability to shock prey. Bats are an order of flying mammals. 3 forms of bat have been encountered. Infected bats are any species of bat infected with the T-virus. They were first seen in the Umbrella Executive Training School, where they had taken up residence in the church above the laboratory following the outbreak caused by Queen Leech. The virus caused the bats to exhibit much more aggressive behavior, as well as a slight increase in body mass. Several bats were also encountered by Rebecca Chambers and Richard Aiken in the underground area of the Spencer Mansion. There were also infected bats on Rockford Island during the viral outbreak, but these showed no sign of increased size. Instead, they have heightened awareness and attack in swarms, but could be deterred by light or usually avoided by walking instead of running around them. The Bandersnatch was a tyrant BOW model type developed by the Umbrella Corporation in 1998. The name originates from Lewis Carroll's poems The Hunting of the Snark and Jabberwocky, which give no description of the creature. The Bandersnatch was developed as an offshoot of the Tyrant Project, intended for reasons of practicality. The reason for this was simple. Those with the necessary genes to be turned into tyrants were small in number, and the tyrants themselves were expensive to develop. In short, the Bandersnatch was a cost-effective alternative proposal. Due to the flawed/cost-effective processes used in their creation, parts of their anatomy tended to atrophy away within moments of their creation. The atrophied parts were often their left arms. In December 1998, a number of Bandersnatches were being stored at the Rockford Island Military Training Center to accumulate combat data against trained anti-BOW soldiers. These BOW saw active combat during the HCF raid on the island, which resulted in a T-virus outbreak. Dr. Albert Wesker, who led the attack, obtained the Bandersnatch research data for further experimentation. The Jabberwock S3 was the product of this research. One Bandersnatch was inadvertently released by Wesker when he threw Chris Redfield away in order to confront Alexia Ashford when she popped up on the screen, as Chris impacted its containment field and damaged it. The gulpworm was bioweapon species created from manipulating earthworm DNA with the T-virus. The gulpworm was created by the administration of the T-virus as part of a bioweapons experiment to improve the earthworm genome. The series was still in the prototype stages during the Rockford Island incident, and the only known sample was used as a practice opponent for Rockford Island's anti-BOW trainees. It was encountered twice at the Umbrella Corporation's prison facility on Rockford Island. The first time it was encountered, it attacked Claire Redfield while she was exploring the military training field. Later, it was killed by Chris Redfield soon after it swallowed Rodrigo Juan Ravel whole. As it died, it spat Rodrigo out. T-078 was a tyrant born from cloning by Umbrella in 1998. It was from the clone T-103 model, and part of its mass-produced type. 078 was noted for being without a limiter coat so as to test the effects of using a T-103 without such a device. Therefore, its blunted claws, which it used as battering rams, may not be present on all other individuals within the mass-produced type. T-078 was delivered to Rockford Island from the Antarctic Transport Terminal in a mission supervised by the Umbrella Security Service agent Hunk, on the orders of the island base's commander, Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford. Whether on Lord Ashford's orders or the intention of its creators, T-078's power limiter was disabled, allowing it to experience minor mutations. During the HCF's attack on Rockford Island, Lord Ashford unleashed the tyrant to kill Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside, 2 prisoners that were making their escape. While the tyrant was seemingly defeated before reaching the prisoner's C-130 Hercules, it managed to grab hold of the plane as it escaped the island moments before a series of explosions destroyed much of the base. Boarding the plane via the cargo bay door, the tyrant's right hand mutated further, which extended his claws. Claire was able to release a cargo crate from its safety harness, allowing it to be thrown into the BOW, sending both out into the sea below. The Hunter II, also known simply as the Improved Hunter, was an enhanced model of the Hunter BOW line developed by the rival company of Umbrella in 1998. A derivation from Umbrella's Hunter BOW program, the Hunter II's origins were the result of Albert Weskier providing a rival organization with Umbrella's classified development data and embryos of the prototype Hunter Alpha. The first known usage of the Hunter II was by the rival company's Special Forces Unit HCF, during their attack on Rockford Island. This model was far more intelligent than Umbrella's model, as it could track down its target through an automated surveillance device called a seeker, also sometimes called a spotter, which directed the hunter to the target with a special frequency. The frequency is presumably received by the special device on the left side of the hunter's head that also comes with an eyepiece. These creatures are first encountered by Chris Redfield on Rockford Island shortly after the appearance of Albert Wesker. A seeker is an automated machine that is used principally for detection of hostile targets. It has otherwise been referred to as a self-propelled surveillance device. The HCF used a model of seeker that operated alongside their Hunter IIs. It would project a beam of light from its head, which is its sight. When it would detect movement from a hostile stepping on its range of vision, it'd alert nearby hunters with a sound the BOW were trained to respond to. The sweeper was a variation of the Hunter II, differentiated from their unaltered brethren by their reddish skin. The intention of the sweeper design was for it to sweep through previously attacked areas to mop up anything left. Other differences included their purple veins and scales that were of a light purple color, along with red, piercing eyes. They attacked in the same manner of the Hunter II. However, unlike other hunter types, their claws had an added poisonous effect, making them considerably more dangerous. The sweeper has a similar body plan to the Hunter II. The main distinction was that the sweeper could release a poisonous substance from its claws, incapacitating people scratched by it. Baby spiders are the offspring of any spider infected with the T-virus. They would live on the back of their mothers and attack nearby foes if she was killed. Like other arthropods, little spider blood contains hemocyanin, creating a green hue, so it is possible to see a green spot on the floor after killing them by single shot or by stepping on them. The Black Widow was a bioorganic weapon BOW produced by Umbrella as part of their development program into arachnid-based weaponry. By October 1998, Umbrella had collected much data on arachnid reactions to the T-virus from the series of incidents which took place in and around Raccoon City that year. With the Latrodectus genus, widow spiders, possessing a much stronger venom in comparison to the tarantula spiders seen in Raccoon City, they were selected as prime test examples. The Black Widows were already being developed by Umbrella by December 1998. The company had plans to distribute them to a number of their facilities via the transport terminal in the Antarctic base. During the Antarctic outbreak of the T-virus, the Black Widows being transported took advantage of the emergency to break out of their crates and settle around the facility. Like many spiders, the Black Widow possessed 4 pairs of legs attached to its cephalothorax, connected to the opisthosoma, abdomen, by a thin section. The Black Widow's appearance was disambiguated from other spider-based BOW by its complete lack of body hair. Like other spiders, the Black Widows would release little spiders from their abdomen if killed. One of these spiders, like the black tiger, reacted differently to the T-virus than others of its kind and, again like the black tiger, reacted by growing significantly larger. The moth was a typical moth that mutated due to prolonged exposure to the T-virus. Unlike the giant moths, these moths' wings have grown in perfect proportion to their bodies. This gives these moths incredible maneuverability. Some of these creatures were encountered in the Antarctic base, where they were able to produce poisonous dust and had also taken to attaching eggs to bodies cocooned in the corridors. These eggs would later hatch into parasitic larvae that would seek out fresh prey, latching onto and poisoning them to eat at their leisure upon death. Moth parasites are the larvae of certain variations of T-virus-infected moth that bursts from a host's chest and latches onto its victim's back. When its host is badly damaged, the parasite can leave their host's chest cavity and land onto a new host's back. It can survive for a while after the host is dead and can attack by grappling its prey. They are poisonous. The ants were an unnamed mutant species of ant created through the DNA-altering effects of the T. veronica virus. The species is believed extinct following the destruction of the Antarctic base in 1998. This species was created in 1983 as part of research by Dr. Alexia Ashford. They were not destroyed or contained when her research was finished and flourished in the Antarctic base in the 15 years she was kept in cold sleep. By 1998, they had constructed a towering anthill as their hive continued to swell in numbers. Though this was soon after destroyed along with the Antarctic base, these ants, enhanced by the virus, grew to larger than average proportions due to excessive production of growth hormones. These changes also affected their behavior, making them more aggressive to the point of openly attacking nearby humans. Their jaws also became strong enough to cause pain to passing humans. Unlike other mutants created through various strains of T-virus, the ants remained fertile and were able to propagate their species rather than relying on the use of cloning methods. The Alexia pod was part of a huge plant-like organism called Veronica plant resting under the Antarctic base with which the T. veronica-infected Alexia Ashford shared a symbiotic relationship. It is unknown who created the plant, although Alexia is perhaps the one behind its creation, during her experiment with the T. veronica virus. The Alexia pod became active at around the same time as Alexia's revival. The plant possessed a number of large, mutated plant vines which extend throughout the terminal and were controlled by Alexia. The tentacles possess great speed and strength, being fast enough to catch up to Steve Burnside and Claire Redfield's fleeing snowmobile in Antarctica, and strong enough to deliver a devastating blow to Steve's mutant form. The plant seemingly had mutagenic properties not unlike V-Complex, as seen in the non-canon game of Oblivion scenario from Resident Evil, The Darkside Chronicles. As Alexia Ashford changed into her second form, the pods had assisted her mutation by supplying the additional biomass required to become larger. Alexia's babies, otherwise known as the attack creatures, are human mutant creatures which were the natural offspring of Alexia Ashford after she achieved the second form of her T. veronica virus mutation. They were created from Alexia's body when she mutated further into her second form, to assist her in her fight against Chris Redfield in the control room passageway. Not much is known about this creature. Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, otherwise referred to as Lord Ashford, was a British nobleman and governor of Rockford Island. He was the son of Veronica Ashford, 1st Countess Ashford, born through genetic engineering along with his sister, Alexia. Legally, however, the two were the children of the geneticist Dr. Alexander Ashford, 6th Earl Ashford. Lord Ashford was the final governor of Rockford Island, having overseen the exodus of the islanders and installation of a prison camp for enemies of the Umbrella Corporation. He died soon after the island fell to a T-virus outbreak orchestrated by an Umbrella rival group. Without a family at the age of 12, the new Lord Ashford was left to continue his family's legacy alone. Driven by this, he overcame his grief and was able to graduate from a respectable English university in 1993. Lord Ashford entered employment with the Umbrella Corporation as the other Ashfords had done. Through the weight of his family name, he earned a number of jobs within the company which, while senior, were largely irrelevant in the company politics. Alongside the position of director of the Antarctic base, he took full advantage of his inherited governorship of Rockford Island. By the following year, the Hispanic settler population was driven out to give space for the construction of a concentration camp for umbrella enemies, a boot camp for anti-BOW training, and a private residence on the other side of a valley, where he hoped to live with Alexia one day. Having been given full control over these facilities, Lord Ashford chose to ignore the Antarctic base and built up a dictatorial rule on Rockfort. Alexia Ashford was a member of British nobility, coming from the Ashford family. The adopted daughter of Dr. Alexander Ashford, 6th Earl Ashford, her real parentage was the result of a cloning experiment referred to as Project Code, Veronica, and was biologically the daughter of Veronica Ashford, 1st Countess Ashford. Through her grandfather, Dr. Edward Ashford, 5th Earl Ashford, she was able to gain a position as a virologist within Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, an enterprise he co-founded. Alexia and her brother Alfred, the future 7th Earl Ashford, were born around 1971 to an unnamed surrogate mother as part of Project Code, Veronica. The project, led by Dr. Alexander Ashford, involved obtaining DNA from the embalmed body of his ancestor, Veronica, and creating a genetically modified clone. The purpose of it was a vanity project intent on restoring the family's reputation with a child comparable to Veronica, whose intelligence was renowned, and prevent Oswell E. Spencer, Lord Spencer, from taking full control over the corporation should Dr. Edward Ashford die. Whereas Alexia's genius intellect fulfilled all of Dr. Ashford's expectations, the higher-than-average Alfred did not compare, perhaps due to having been the result of a freak error during the cloning process intended solely to create Alexia. Nonetheless, both were raised by Dr. Ashford at his home under the Antarctic base. At the age of 10, Alexia graduated from a prestigious university and was employed by Umbrella Pharmaceuticals as one of its virologists. Isolated from other scholars by her young age, and from children by her intellect, Alexia's only comfort was her brother Alfred, having already developed a loathing of her father as another member of the ignorant masses. In February 1983, sometime around her 12th birthday, her brother Alfred told her about a secret room in the Antarctic base, at which she was working at the time, and told her he needed her family gemstone, a large ruby inside a silver choker, to open it. Offering it to him, she aided him in opening the secret corridor. Once inside, the twins learned the complete truth about their creation, and both grew immensely hateful of their father. Capturing him in March 1983, they used him as a test subject for the T-Veronica virus that she had created by binding together the progenitor virus and the remnants of an ancient virus found within a queen ant. Since her father didn't have any preparation beforehand, the experiment turned Alexander into the insane monster known as Nosferatu. Taking notes on her father's progress, Alexia discovered certain flaws in her virus and planned to inject herself with her own affliction to become a superior being. Using the data she had obtained from her progenitor, Alexia discovered a way to harness the full power of T-Veronica without any side effects. By having herself put into cryogenic suspension for 15 years while the virus, slowed by the ultra-low temperatures to a point where it would not destroy her tissues through overly rapid mutation, matured within her unconscious body. In December 1983, she assigned Alfred to protect her and carry out her will while she was inactive, and proceeded to enter the cryostatic state. A decade and a half after this, she awoke with the first sight of her new stage being the death of her brother, whose body she cradled in her arms, who had activated the thawing process mere moments prior to his demise. Now in full control of her virus, Alexia sought to begin her plan of dominion over the world as its queen, and using her newfound powers, she remotely controlled one of the massive tentacles resting below the Antarctic base to destroy the escape vehicle of Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside. Also, she captured Claire and Steve for the purpose of subjecting them to her experiments and to make them pay for killing her brother. She imprisoned Steve in a coliseum with suits of armor and repeated the experiment that mutated her father, only with her own derivative of the mutant strain. Later on, she appeared to confront Albert Wesker in the replica of the Spencer Mansion under the Antarctic ice. There, she first evolved with the Veronica strain into the first step of what, she envisioned, was true godhood, shedding her human skin and hair and turning into a powerful mutant that greatly resembled her human stage with gray skin, darkened vessels and arteries, and chitinous growths covering her body as a form of rudimentary armor. She also controlled her body's blood, which by then had acquired flammable properties, usable through bloodshed, and her head forms a skin-like hair with a short fringe on the right and long to the left. She and Wesker engaged in a brief fight. Wesker quickly found Alexia impervious to any physical blows he could launch, and thus retreated and left Chris Redfield to fight Alexia, who soundly defeated her. Weakened by her first defeat, she pursues Chris and Claire into the control room passageway through one of the Veronica mutant breeder pods. After being shot by Chris, she starts mutating into a massive biomass-like cocoon resembling an anthill, breeding countless imperfect larvae to attack Chris along with her 4 tentacles, fire, and insect-like appendages. In the Darkside Chronicles, several of Alexia's breeder pods had assisted her mutation by supplying the additional biomass required to become larger. Despite this, she was beaten once again. However, Alexia was not finished yet, as she responded by evolving further by ordering the Veronica ants below the platform to cover her. Then she develops wings from her 4 tentacles, sheds the remains of the oviduct, and became a giant dragonfly-like monster using the ants, capable of spewing great amounts of flame and absorbing all gunfire. Nevertheless, Chris managed to destroy Alexia with an experimental weapon called the linear launcher, thus ending the Ashford family line. Redfield's search for the Umbrella headquarters ended quickly in late December. His sister, Claire, was captured by Umbrella's security division in France and transported to a prison camp on Rockford Island in the Southern Ocean. A strain of the T-virus engulfed the island as its security forces defended an invasion from HCF, a paramilitary unit under the command of Albert Wesker. Redfield himself was made aware of this when he was contacted by Leon S. Kennedy, a former rookie RPD officer turned U.S. Stratcom agent that Claire met in Raccoon City. Redfield immediately traveled to the island to rescue her. Immediately, he met Rodrigo Juan Raval, a security guard who freed Claire from her cell earlier during the chaos. Redfield continued to explore the remains of the island's facilities after he learned that Claire left the island altogether, and was confronted by Wesker, who revealed his superhuman abilities and informed him that Claire was at an Umbrella facility in Antarctica. Redfield piloted one of the facility's Harrier jets to the Ross Ice Shelf, Raccoon City. Claire went out in search for her brother. Believing him to be at Umbrella Europe's Paris laboratory, she infiltrated it in December and was captured by the facility's security forces. Taken to Rockford Island by Rodrigo Juan Raval, Claire's arrival coincided with a sabotage operation conducted by HCF, a paramilitary group under the command of Albert Wesker. The saboteurs succeeded in releasing the T-virus and BOW across the island, and Umbrella's local paramilitary forces were wiped out. Feeling sorry for her, Raval released Claire from her cell, though believed she would eventually die anyway. On the surface, she met Steve Burnside, a 17-year-old who was interned following his father's betrayal of Umbrella for selling company secrets on the black market. The two searched for an airport to escape the island, but were repeatedly hampered by Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, the island's commander, who believed Redfield to be linked to the saboteurs. Before they found a plane, Claire was able to get in contact with Leon via a computer. Leon, who had gained employment within the U.S. government's covert anti-Umbrella pursuit and investigation team, got in contact with Chris and sent him her location. Steve Burnside was a prisoner sent to Rockford Island along with his father. This was due to his father, an Umbrella employee that was selling the company's secrets at auction, but he was caught. He and Steve are taken prisoner while Steve's mother was killed. Steve and his father are imprisoned in Rockford Island's prison until it was taken over by the HCF. During the course of his escape, Steve and his father became separated. However, Steve managed to survive the zombie onslaught caused by the sudden outbreak of the experimental T-virus. Sometime later, Steve met Claire after attacking her on the presumption that she was a zombie. However, Claire shot the light that he shined on her and defended herself. These actions caused Steve to realize his error and cordially met her face to face. Steve left Claire in order to procure an airplane to escape the island. When Steve was found again in the monitoring room, which was the room after the 3D autoduplicator device, he was looking the information up on Chris Redfield. When Claire asked him what he was doing there, Steve asked Claire if Chris was her relative. Claire asked him if he meant her brother, and Steve realized the fact that they are siblings. He tapped on the lever that released the lock on the door, saying, "Well, it seemed that your brother was under surveillance by Umbrella." After Claire emailed Leon to tell Chris that he was being monitored as well as the coordinates of the island, Steve said that Chris would not come and Claire would just end up disappointed if she relied on others. Steve stormed out of the room. Steve took the gold Lugers in the island's palace. Because of his attitude, he did not realize that he could put them back and disable the trap that he set off. When Claire released the trap, Steve claimed the Lugers, saying that he found them, although Claire was the one who found them first, and he was keeping them. Then, he proposed a deal to Claire, a fully automatic gun for the Lugers. When Claire was thinking, Steve said that he would see her around and bolted out of the room, leaving Claire alone once more. When Claire was almost killed by a bandersnatch, Steve jumped through a window and shot the creature. While he was still looking at Claire, he shot the bandersnatch at least 5 times before looking at it. After Steve kicked the BOW, he shot it one last time before the Lugers ran out of ammunition. Because Claire had the submachine guns with her, she gave them to Steve in return for his Lugers. He found out that they are empty and accused Claire of cheating. When Steve learned that there was a full magazine for the machine guns, Steve gave Claire a boost so she could retrieve it. After Steve took the full magazine, Alfred Ashford took both Claire and Steve down to the B1 floor. Thinking that they would die there, however, Steve cleared all of the zombies from their path so Claire was able to go through easily. Steve said to Claire when she arrived that the machine guns are a lot more reliable than any person. After Claire asked Steve where his family was, he was enraged. When they reached the 2nd floor, Steve and Claire both fell off an unstable part of a walkway. In the aftermath of the fall, Claire's foot became trapped under the rubble. As Steve got onto his feet, he encountered his father, now infected with the T-virus. Unable to shoot him, Steve was unable to act. Just when it seemed that he would reach Steve, Claire unintentionally attracted his father's attention. Steve shot his infected father down just as he was about to bite Claire. However, in shooting his father, Steve completely depleted the ammunition loaded into his submachine guns. After coming to grips with what he did, Steve told Claire about how he and his father came to be on the island. Afterward, Claire left Steve alone to continue with coming to grips with his loss. When Claire was about to be killed by Alexia, Steve stormed in. He was wounded by a gunshot, but he opened fire and wounded Alexia. As he and Claire checked the room, they are attacked by Alfred. Steve kicked Alfred to the floor and they discovered that Alfred, having a split personality, was playing Alexia. They escaped the residence after the self-destruct system was activated. They both evacuated the island via a plane that closely resembled a C-130 transport. Steve piloted the plane off the island, but Alfred set the plane to autopilot and it flew to the Antarctic facility. Upon reaching Antarctica, their plane crash-landed into the Antarctic base, which was infested by the infected on the other planes. After a search of the facility, the two encountered and armed Alfred. Claire was held at gunpoint, but Steve was able to get the drop on Alfred, shooting him with his submachine guns. The impact of the rounds caused Alfred to stagger backward against a railing which broke away and caused him to plummet down a hole. They explored the outside of the facility where an escaped Alexander found them. Steve was pushed off the roof and nearly fell to his death. Claire managed to lift him to safety after killing Alexander. When Claire started walking, he said, "I swear I'll protect you next time, Claire." The two found a truck which they used to escape the structure. However, a dying Alfred managed to revive his sister who destroyed their truck in revenge for Alfred's death. The two are captured by Alexia and Steve was injected with the veronica virus. He mutated in front of Claire and attempted to kill her with a giant axe. When she locked herself up in a cell, one of Alexia's tentacles broke through the wall and grabbed a hold of her. When Steve broke into the room, he aimed his axe high, ready to kill her. But his body managed to fight against the virus and his newly regained consciousness allowed him to strike the Alexia pod. The remainder of the Alexia pod caused him to hit very hard to a wall. While dying, Steve quickly reverted to normal and told Claire that Chris kept his promise and he loved her, but was unable to fight anymore. He succumbed to his injuries. He was only 17 at the time of his death. The HCF managed to collect his body to take the samples of the veronica virus. Albert Wesker told Chris that it might be possible to revive Steve and maybe even see Claire again. Of course, this was clearly a jab at Claire's emotions which angered her. Following the acquisition of G, the organization began sending their paramilitary group, HCF, out on raids to Umbrella bases to recover data and bioweapons samples. Weskier led a raid on Rockford Island in December 1998. Remembering Alexia Ashford's research on veronica, the Ashford-owned island was a logical place to begin the search. Saboteurs arrived on the island ahead of the main assault and planted explosives within the military training center, which released a T-virus strain into the ecosystem as well as releasing BOW. Much of the island's infrastructure was destroyed in the subsequent bombing by HCF's aircraft, followed by the deployment of special teams searching for the veronica samples, of which Weskier took direct involvement. They were unsuccessful in locating samples on the island, though Weskier did discover Claire Redfield, Chris' younger sister, had been taken captive by Umbrella and imprisoned in its concentration camp. Chris arrived the following day, looking for her. Weskier was interrupted on both occasions when about to kill them, and soon after left the island for a submarine after discovering Alexia was alive and well at Umbrella's Antarctic base. This individual was an Umbrella researcher stationed in the Rockford Island Military Training Center's laboratory. When Albert Weskier and the HCF forces attacked the island, this Umbrella researcher was still working in the biological experiment room. The attack caused a T-virus outbreak, causing a Bandersnatch to break free from its incubation chamber. The researcher ran to the window to get Claire Redfield's attention in hopes that she would open the door from her end. Unfortunately, she was unable to work out how to open it. Spotting him, the Bandersnatch grabbed his head with its elastic-like arm and crushed it in front of Claire. The Dr. Zombie is the name given to an otherwise unnamed doctor who worked on Rockford Island. The anatomist was a mentally unstable schizophrenic and sadist, believing there to be a demon within his head that made him dangerously impulsive and enjoyed watching people die. Despite this, the island's commandant, Lord Alfred Ashford, allowed him to continue his medical profession on the island, and even constructed an underground chamber below the medical hut so he could perform sadistic rituals on camp prisoners before their eventual death and subsequent dissection. The chamber was hidden from others by an elaborate door mechanism. The doctor grew to fear Lord Ashford, however, understanding clearly that if Ashford lost favor with him, it would mean his death. During the T-virus outbreak, the doctor sustained a serious leg fracture and was infected. Unconscious, he was mistaken for dead and placed inside a body bag. He later escaped from the bag and began eating part of an unconscious body he had dissected prior to his infection. Both got up to attack Claire Redfield when she was discovered, though both were subsequently killed by her. Rodrigo Juan Raval, 1966 to 1998, was an Umbrella Security Service, USS, employee. Though assigned to the defense of Umbrella Europe's Paris laboratory, Raval became caught up in the biohazard on Rockford Island. Raval was born and raised on Rockford Island, which had been planted by Spanish colonists for generations. The island was for some time under the ownership of the Ashford family, a British aristocratic house, with each successor to the earldom becoming its new governor. In the 1990s, Alfred Ashford, 7th Earl Ashford, had the settlement torn down and forced much of the population off the island to make way for a boot camp for Umbrella Security Service recruits as well as a concentration camp for enemies of the company. Raval himself joined the Umbrella Security Service and was assigned to the Paris laboratory as 3rd Squad's leader in December 1998. The Paris laboratory was infiltrated by Claire Redfield, leading to a shootout in the facility culminating in a UH-6 helicopter firing through the windows. Raval succeeded personally in capturing Redfield and traveled with her back to Rockford Island as a concentration camp inmate. Soon after Raval's arrival, HCF attacked the island, bombing the ground and releasing the T-virus. Raval himself received a torso injury, possibly from being shot. Having a change of heart, he released Redfield from her holding cell to give her a chance to fight and escape rather than die in her cell. Redfield later returned his kindness by providing him with hemostatic medicine and her brother's lighter. Carl Grisham transported the experimental alloy TG-01 to Rockford Island. He was killed when the Humvee he was riding in crashed into a wall during the HCF's invasion of the island and the subsequent release of the T-virus. Carl was a trainee on Rockford Island scheduled for a security transport to deliver commodities and special supplies from the airport to the Rockford prison. As per procedure, he requested access to the facility through prison chief Paul Steiner before entry. It was around this time the HCF began to bomb the base, causing an airborne spread of the T-virus and the unintentional release of BOW. Carl likely crashed during the bombing run and chaos caused by the biohazard. He later resurrected as a zombie. He became the first zombie seen on Code Veronica and was eliminated by Claire Redfield. Mr. Burnside was an employee of Umbrella imprisoned at Rockford Island. Mr. Burnside, while working for Umbrella, was discovered in 1998 to be selling sensitive data regarding their BOW development onto the black market without permission. He and his son, Steve, are kidnapped and imprisoned on Rockford Island. His wife, on the other hand, was gunned down. Sometime prior to the Rockford Island outbreak, Mr. Burnside was infected with the T-virus in one of Alfred Ashford's insane experiments. Burnside managed to write a note to his son before succumbing to the effects of the T-virus and degenerating into a zombie. When he attacked Claire Redfield, Steve, who was accompanying her, gunned him down, moments before he would have bitten Claire. This left Steve in complete shock. Dr. Alexander Ashford, 6th Earl Ashford, was a geneticist who worked for Umbrella Pharmaceuticals in its early years. The son of Dr. Edward Ashford, 5th Earl Ashford, he was part of the 20th century British aristocracy. Alexander was the last legal heir of the Ashford earldom. As his children were secretly adopted, Alexander Ashford was the son of Edward Ashford. He helped his father study the progenitor virus. However, Alexander did not possess outstanding skill in the field of virology and eventually became a researcher for the Umbrella Corporation using his knowledge of genetic engineering. Alexander never became a notable scientist for Umbrella, though he did discover the gene that regulated intellect. He tried to use his discovery to revive the Ashford family's reputation and took DNA from Veronica Ashford, the family's matriarch, who he'd become obsessed with. Alexander combined Veronica's DNA with a dangerous gene that increased intelligence and his own to resurrect Veronica. The result was twins, Alfred and Alexia, and while Alfred had only slightly above average intelligence, Alexia was a child prodigy with incredible intellect, becoming chief senior researcher at Umbrella's Antarctic facility when she was only 10. However, Alexander began to grow horrified both at the prospect of the public learning how the twins came into existence and by the two's total disregard for humanity. He became determined that no one ever find out the truth, hiding the records of his experiment in a secret chamber in Umbrella's Antarctic base. Over 10 years later, Alfred found the room and began working to get inside, needing the 3 family gemstones to unlock it. The first 2 were easy to obtain since he and Alexia owned them, and eventually tricked Alexander into giving him the other one. However, when Alfred accessed the room, what he found out made him snap, since it revealed that he was just an unintended byproduct of Alexander's experimentation and the disturbing nature of the experiment. It was around this time that Alexander became concerned with Alexia, who had become obsessed with the T. veronica virus, a viral strain she had developed by combining the progenitor virus with Queen Ant's DNA. Alexia had also become determined to use it on herself and release it upon the world. Eventually, Alexander created an experimental anti-BOW weapon known as the linear launcher, which he installed in the facility as a last resort to stop her if she carried through on her plans. However, Alfred, bitter that his father hadn't created him with the same intelligence as Alexia, captured Alexander. He used his father as a test subject for Alexia's T. veronica virus, and eventually Alexander had mutated into a psychotic monster. Deeming him a failed experiment, Alfred and Alexia, disgusted that he was a failure even as an experiment, chained him in a secret room in the Antarctic base, where he remained in solitary confinement until 1998. Hidden away from the facility, he became the monster known as Nosferatu to the workers, who were terrified by his noises. For 15 years, Nosferatu remained in the chamber, disturbing all the workers with his cries of agony. Eventually, Claire Redfield encounters him after finding the secret chamber in his office. She is horrified as he stares up at the ceiling roaring, where she soon leaves in horror after Alfred's attempt to kill Claire, which was interrupted by Steve Burnside, resulting in Alfred's fall into the mining room's hole. Nosferatu forced his way out of most of his bonds and headed after the two, eventually catching up to them at the base's helipad. He knocked Steve off of the helipad, leaving him hanging onto a ledge, and attacked Claire. After a brief battle, she was able to kill Nosferatu by targeting his exposed heart, finally ending his suffering. Somehow, Nosferatu's body ended up in the ocean, where Alexia, who had been awakened by a dying Alfred, had a crane grapple onto his corpse. When Chris Redfield activated the crane, Nosferatu's corpse was pulled out of the water, with his pierce falling off of him. When the crane pulled his body to the left, Chris came across Alexia, who commented that Nosferatu's mutation was how she dealt with insignificant bugs. During their final fight, Claire and Chris used the linear launcher that Alexander himself had designed to stop Alexia in the event she truly did try and follow through with world domination. The weapon killed her instantly, avenging Alexander and truly ending the Ashford line.